Today, I'm going to tell you a story about hidden beauty, a vow whispered in the dark, and a love strong enough to change an entire town, called Dust Rock. In a dusty little town, on the edge of the Wild West, there was a wedding that left the whole town speechless. Not because the bride was beautiful, but because everyone believed she was the ugliest woman they'd ever seen. And the groom? A cowboy, the town's most charming heartbreaker, wanted by every lady in Dust Rock. They said he made a bet. They laughed, they pointed. But on the night of the wedding, every mocking tongue fell silent. If you love stories that stir the heart and bring the Old West back to life, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. There's a whole trail of tales waiting just ahead, and trust me, you won't want to miss the next one. In the dusty frontier town of Dust Rock, Kansas, in the spring of 1877, suspicions and gossip were treasured more than gold. It was a place where a rumor could gallop down the street faster than the horses that pulled the stagecoaches. Yet no rumor had rattled the townsfolk as thoroughly as the one that spread on that bright Sunday morning. Beau Danner was an icon in Dust Rock, a rugged traveler, charming gambler, rumored lover of every saloon lady from here to the Missouri River. 30 years old, bronzed by the prairie sun, famous for his reckless grin and stories that grew taller with each retelling. Yet no tale could match the shock when he publicly declared he would wed Irene McAllister, the most loathed, ridiculed schoolteacher in the territory. The irony whipped through Dust Rock like a prairie fire. At the break of dawn, the churchyard stood silent, rows of boarded-up pews scattered across red-dusted ground. Suddenly, a stagecoach groaned to a stop. Out stepped Irene McAllister, 26 years old, stern and nondescript. Her clothes were humble, a drab dress that had seen better days, possibly made by her own needle. A wide, dingy bonnet shrouded her face, and thick spectacles hid her eyes, making her appear nearly frozen in form. The townsfolk stopped their morning rituals, mid-step, mouths agape. A cruel hush settled, followed by whispered curses. He must have lost a bet. Is he mocking us? Or worse, losing his mind? Children leaned against fence posts. Mamas clutched their aprons. Even the preacher hesitated mid-breath. All stared as the teacher descended with calculated calm. Then, like a tawdry steel horseman, Beau Danner appeared on the church steps. Hat in hand, eyes steady, he strode forward and before praying eyes and gossipy mouths knelt on one knee. In that moment, every snicker, every sneer froze. His voice echoed softly, "Irene McAllister, will you marry me?" A gasp, cold and sharp, rolled through Dust Rock. Some thought he'd gone insane. Others saw theater. Few glimpsed sincerity. Irene's expression remained unreadable. She raised her head, but her eyes, always concealed, betrayed nothing. Among the crowd, some whispered she had put on that shabby garb deliberately, an act to mislead and hide a truth that only Beau might discern. But none could deny the impossible absurdity, the handsome rake courting the so-called ugly spinster. A local wag let slip, "He's better off losing his mind than a bet in that saloon." Laughter erupted, bitter and sharp. But it fell on cold ground. This was no jest. The gravity of that moment pressed on Dust Rock like the weight of the approaching summer. As Beau rose to his feet, Irene nodded, once deliberate, quiet, and his hand closed over hers. The bride and groom moved toward the church entrance, and the crowd parted like a sea of shocked faces. Dust Rock stood frozen in that frame, absorbing the inconceivable. From every corner, battered hearts and hardened minds wondered why him? Why her? How could a man famed for fleeting passions choose this? The town's jokes rose louder after the door closed behind them. Yet beneath the ridicule, a seed of awe planted itself because Beau had chosen and Irene had accepted. And that defied every expectation. A stray breeze dusted embers of straw, and in that hush, a quiet voice within the storyteller whispered, "Sometimes the boldest choices come cloaked in violence and misdirection. The ugliest rumors can lead to the most unexpected truths." Dustrock would talk of this wedding until the prairie swallowed what remained of its memory. The story would twists and shivers become legend. But at that moment, it changed from joke to mystery, from mockery to marvel. Beau Danner never planned on love. That much was certain. A man known for roving smiles, reckless bets, and doors swinging wide at the sight of his hat, Beau built his reputation on never staying still too long. So when he swaggered into the Dustrock saloon a few days before his wedding and loudly declared he could get the ugliest schoolmarm in Kansas to marry him, within 10 days, half the town hollered in approval, the other half spat out laughs of disbelief. The next day, Irene McAllister surprised everyone by nodding her agreement without a flicker of expression. She strode in, plain and untouched like a statue carved from stone, and repeated the words, "Yes, I will." Few believed she'd meant them. From one point of view, it was a joke Beau started meant to steal a thrill on a slow afternoon. But in his chest, the laughter echoed hollow and sharp. The scoop of pride told him to go ahead. He'd win his wager and be applauded by every backroom table in Dustrock. But beneath that, something else stirred. A memory. The memory of Lydia. Lydia with her boundless curiosity, the quiet promise in her eyes. The smartest girl he knew, with a wit sharper than a rattler's fang. She'd been the one he promised to run away with. He remembered telling her in the back of the cabin late at night, "Wait for my return." But when he came back, she wasn't there. She'd gone, and Beau's laughter turned brittle after that. So he sealed his heart behind a wall of charm bets and fleeting flings. Never again would he trust what he saw. It was easier to hide behind a grin. But when he saw Irene unbothered by the laughter, unbowed by ridicule, something crackled in him. He felt Lydia's ghost behind Irene's quiet gaze. After the surprise yes, Dustrock had a field day. Voices clucked together like hens, a dare, a lost bet, a heart gone crooked. Everyone tossed their scorn like tumbleweed. But Beau held his face steady, masked in easy laughter. The wedding announcement triggered whispers louder than the church bells crack at noon. "A pity match," barked old Mr. Cole at the general store. "She won't cry at the altar," Mrs. Patterson scoffed, the preacher's wife. Children snickered, daring each other to ask if the preacher had accommodations for laughing breaches of decorum. Still at the edge of the churchyard, Beau found himself unshakably tethered to something true in Irene. He watched her stand beneath the steeple, hands clasped, breathing slow, her posture rigid, aura quiet, like she had no choice but to hold herself strong. He tried to keep it distant, telling himself it was still only a game, a dare to make Dustrock laugh. Just one more riddle to keep his edge. Inside the church, he sat beside Esther. The preacher droned his words, but Beau heard none of it. His mind drifted back to the day Lydia vanished, her eyes brimming with trust, her confidence that he'd return, and how he never did. That ache hit Beau anew, a fresh reminder of promises broken. Irene sat with rigid eyes downcast behind glass lenses. Still, somehow he sensed the subtle tremor, just a hint of hesitation in her spine. It told him she'd stepped into something as unknown as he had. That afternoon in the saloon, the laughter reached a crescendo. Folks cheered, mocking the scene. They raised their glasses in mock toast to the cowboy who married the ugly schoolmarm. Beau replied with nods and polite smiles, but his heart was locked onto Irene's journey. Her courage to stand there silent, composed, unstoppable, rekindled a promise inside him. He'd sworn off long ago he'd no longer judge what the eyes didn't show. At dusk he found her alone behind the church, quiet as a shadow. The air smelled of pine smoke and something softer, like hidden hurt. "What are you thinking?" he asked, voice hollow and honest. She turned slow, and her voice was almost shallow. "Did you mean it?" Her glasses caught the fading light. He swallowed hard. "Yes," he whispered. "I lost a bet. I thought it'd be funny. But standing in the light with you, it doesn't feel like jest anymore." Her eyes flickered not of surprise, but of recognition, of truth. They walked side by side out of the churchyard, words unsaid, wrapping around them like dusk's veil. Days forward were quieter. The town kept laughing, but Irene had turned to something else, unexpected respect. At the schoolhouse, Irene taught fractions and frontier poetry with unshaken poise. Beau watched from the doorframe, tired boots, tired heart, still learning how fierce love could look in violent resilience. At night, he accepted no welcome the weight of what he'd done. He let the laughter trail behind, distant as wagon wheels at dawn. Near was someone who had survived the world's ridicule and remained still beautiful to those who choose to see. Lydia's memory faded, not, but softened. In Irene's presence, Beau understood the gamble was never on her, it was on himself. Could he choose differently this time? Could he live a promise meant for someone who finally dared to believe in him and hold? And so the daring bet turned to a fragile vow, not spoken, but recognized. Beau smiled at the thought in the darkness, willing himself to be better, for once and maybe for the rest of eternity. Irene had never felt quite at home in Dustrock until now. The farmhouse, perched just beyond the dusty edge of town, offered solitude more than splendor. Wide planked floors, a low roof that whispered of winter frost, a hearth that crackled with cautious warmth. Here, under the same roof as Beau Danner, she was no longer merely the town's scorned school. The first mornings at home, she tiptoed through routines like a ghost rediscovering her own body. She brewed tea by the window, watching Beau saddle their mares in the pale dawn, his silhouette calm and steady, a far cry from the roguish figure the town knew. He'd kiss her silently before heading out to feed livestock, bruised hands steadying into the rhythm of farm life. His laughter. For her part, Irene took to teaching again, her classrooms now sketchbooks and broken crayons, replaced with lessons in reading, arithmetic, and gentle lessons about courage. The children's small human noises offered a unique balm for her weary heart. At home, she learned to tend the garden, herbs for teas, vegetables for dinner, a few flowers for fragile beauty. Beau sometimes appeared but darkness clung to her story. A truth she kept locked behind wide lenses and a flat tone in her voice. Dustrock thought she'd escaped something, but she had a fierce storm broke one night, when Irene stayed late after school gathering flower petals with Beau in the herb garden. Rain hammered like horse hooves, and in that blur of darkness, Irene momentarily removed her glasses while gathering rain-soaked petals. Beau saw her clearly for a breath. That afternoon, someone in the teacher's row noticed she was too composed, too educated, not just each time a rumor rose. He whispered just loud enough for her to hear, "You deserve more than this disguise." She'd only smile, a soft curl of lips only Beau ever saw. Because her past wasn't something she could reclaim. She had left it behind with open. Another storm came. Dustrock's saloon lights flickered with gossip voices raised, curses spit out like horseshoes in mud. Back at the farmhouse, she told Beau quietly about the arranged marriage she'd fled. About Dustrock, continued to talk. They didn't know she'd been a lady with marble floors, and in the mornings, he rode out to gather horses at daybreak. Dustrock's whispers softened eventually. When a stranger asked about her past, Beau said only Irene had arrived as the ugly schoolmarm. And so beneath that same prairie moon, in that house of dusty wood and patient glow, they quietly became more than what anyone ever expected. Dustrock had seen its share of scandal, but few things stirred the dust quite like a stranger rolling in, with the scent of East Coast perfume, and the kind of secrets that didn't ride well in daylight. Constance Barlow arrived with a hat too sharp for prairie winds and a smile that meant trouble. She called herself a reporter, but Sheriff Clay had seen her kind before, hands too clean, curiosity too practiced. And she asked the wrong question first. Where might I find Miss Irene McAllister? Clay leaned back in his chair, boots crossed, chewing slow on a toothpick. That depends who's asking. An old acquaintance, she said, folding a letter with a wax seal too fine for this side of Kansas. From New York. The sheriff gave a slow nod, filing the name away. McAllister, East Coast. He'd suspected. He remembered a cable from years back, mentioning a young woman gone missing. But he hadn't asked then, and he sure as hell wasn't about to now, not without reason. That reason came quicker than expected. Later that afternoon, Constance found Irene in the schoolhouse, wiping chalk from her hands. The children had just left, their laughter trailing off, like wind through cornstalks. Irene froze when she saw her. Constance. Still hiding, I see, glasses bun. The poor schoolmarm act. It's impressive, really. Why are you here? You know why. Your family's patience is gone. You're to return. Mary Harold has agreed. Or, she pulled out a folded paper. This gets sent to the Kansas City Gazette, and perhaps a few more places. Irene's hands trembled. You wouldn't. I would. I will. Unless you do the proper thing and come home. You've had your frontier fantasy, time to stop playing pioneer. The schoolhouse fell into silence. That evening, the sun set slow and heavy over Beau's homestead. Irene packed in silence. She folded every piece of her simple life with care, as if it might weigh less folded neatly. Her letter sat on the table, ink barely dry. I am not who you think I am. I wish I were. But I've lived too long in shadows. I don't deserve you, Beau. I never did. She left before dawn. Beau found the note as he poured his morning coffee. The quiet of the cabin felt suddenly loud, like every corner echoed her absence. He read the letter once, then twice, then sat down staring at it like it might spell itself differently. His hands shook, not from anger, from something deeper, something brittle. He rode into town like a storm without lightning. Doors opened, tongues wagged. He ignored them all, heading straight for Sheriff Clay. She's gone, Beau said. Left me a note. Said she doesn't deserve me. Doesn't deserve anything. Clay studied him. There was a woman here yesterday. Said she knew Irene. Came from the east. Name of Constance Barlow. Looked like trouble with polished boots. Beau's jaw tensed. He turned on his heel, fists clenched. He didn't need more words. He needed to find her. He searched the school. Empty. The saloon silent. Her favorite spot by the river untouched. He searched the edge of town and finally the old logging trail, where wagon ruts led into the hills. That's where he found her, sitting on a boulder, hat in her lap, eyes to the horizon. No disguise, just Irene, or whoever she really was. You left, he said, voice hoarse. She didn't look at him. I had to. You wouldn't understand. Try me. She closed her eyes. I was promised to a man I couldn't love. I ran, changed my name, hid here, taught children. I thought I'd escaped, but Constance found me, and I couldn't bear the thought of you hating me for the lie. Beau stepped forward. I don't give a damn about names or pasts. I care about who stood beside me when the town laughed, who didn't flinch when they mocked us. That's you. Whoever you were, whoever you are, that's still you. She looked up, the eyes wet. He knelt beside her as he had that first day. Come home, Irene. Not because you have to, because I can't imagine it without you. For a long time the prairie wind answered. Then softly she reached for his hand. They returned to Dustrock, not as scandal, but as storm-weathered survivors. Clay nodded from his porch. The town watched silent. No jeers this time. No snickers. And as Beau opened the church door for her, even the bell seemed to ring softer. Because secrets have a weight. But sometimes love can carry more. Dustrock's small church stood silent, except for the low hum of lanterns and whispered prayers. It was the night them all had teased about, the cowboy's ugly wife wedding. But now, under flickering candlelight, Beau Danner walked up the aisle toward Irene McAllister, and the world shifted. Beau's heart hammered as Irene appeared. She was resplendent, not plain, not awkward, truly beautiful in ways Dustrock had never believed. A pristine white gown hugged her silhouette, cinched at the waist, its skirts spilling feather light over the worn wooden floor. Her hair was pinned high, dark coils graceful against pale skin. Her eyes, deep and steady, held no pretense, only the truth of the woman she always was. For Beau, time slowed. He remembered the bet, the distraction, the doubt. "I'm sorry," he'd whispered, his voice almost weeing. "From the moment I saw you behind that bonnet and those thick glasses, I felt something. Didn't know what it was. I thought I was chasing laughter or distraction. But I was chasing you, the real you. And now I know. I love you." Irene smiled softly, that quiet crescent of affection only he could coax. "Thank you," she replied, voice steady and true. "I was afraid I didn't want to be loved only for beauty or for secrets. But I want this, us, with me fully as I am. No shadows, no two-faced steps." As the preacher began the ceremony, Dustrock held its breath. The rustic pews, the quiet hush, made every vow weighty and real. Meanwhile, Constance Barlow stood at the back, a contradiction in well-tailored black. She had returned once a determined agitator, now a quiet observer. Her mission had been delivered in shadow, and whispers coax Irene back to New York, under familial pressure, or expose her origins. But what she witnessed transformed her. Constance watched the way Irene stood with Beau. Her expression soft, vulnerable but strong. She saw not a marriage of convenience or an arranged match, but fierce affection. Memories of her own upbringing, the gilded halls, the barter of alliances by marriage rose to her mind. She realized Irene had found something more precious than inherited wealth, agency, choice, love. So Constance turned away. She would return east alone. Let the secrets lie. Let the truth live in that church, immortalized by candlelight and the soft sound of Beau's vows. Beau's voice echoed in the sacred hush. "I, Beau, take you, Irene, to be my lawfully wedded wife, to respect you, protect you, cherish you as the woman. You are not the face the world printed on you, but your heart. Your mind, your soul." "I," Irene echoed, voice unwavering. "Take you, Beau, my partner, my home, my love. I promise to heal and stand together through storms and scrub. To be seen not for facades, but for truth." He slid a simple gold band on her finger, one Beau had chosen when he realized her worth was far more precious than jewels. Inside, she had etched with Beau beauty hidden, revealed. And then he kissed her soft, long, reverent, a seal on promises deeper than any betrayal or regret. Dustrock exhaled. The congregation reopened their eyes. The mocking smiles were gone. In their place, the schoolteacher lifted radiant. She wasn't ugly. She was entirety. The cowboy, once notorious for jest, was now known for honest depth. Even the barmaid dried her tears, whispering, "Well, I'll be." The preacher cleared his throat, halting the hush. "Friends and neighbors, I present to you Mr. and Mrs. Beau Danner." Dustrock fell silent. Then, as if on cue, applause bloomed, gentle, heartfelt, spontaneous. Tears glistened on harsh faces, warm like desert dawn. Later, at the modest reception in the community hall, lanterns swung gently. Music hummed low. Beau offered his arm to Irene, guiding her across the wooden floor. They swayed with quiet intimacy, No fancy steps, just comfort. A neighbor whispered, "I never thought beauty was more than powder and ribbons." But she glowed from within. Another ventured, "Sometimes beauty finds its way late. But when it does, it's worth holding on to." Beau leaned in. "Dustrock got it right this time." Irene rested her head on his shoulder. "We got it right." As the night wore late, Beau and Irene slipped away behind the hall, stepping into the crisp air. The sky stretched above, like a promise. Midnight stars blinked in approval. Beau took Irene's hand, still trembling with all he felt. "We made them see you," he said softly. She turned to him. "They just needed to see what I already was." He brushed his lips to her temple. Every version he promised, now and always. In the days that followed, stories of the wedding spread quietly, not as scandal, but as legend. Across Dustrock, people changed how they looked. No more mockery at next teacher's arrival. Children began to whisper to each other, "Might be someone that surprises you." Beau was no longer just a gambler. He was a man of depth and love. Irene was no longer dirty or plain. She was revered for courage and quiet truth. Because sometimes beauty arrives late. And when it does, it's worth treasuring every breath, every moment, sustained forever. Some stories ain't meant to be loud. They start in silence like a breeze through prairie grass and end with the kind of stillness that stays in your bones long after the fire's gone cold. Beau Danner and Irene McAllister weren't the kind of folk this town expected to fall in love. But maybe that's the point. See, Dustrock was a place that judged quick and forgave slow. But love, real love, don't care about dust rumor or what the world thinks it ought to look like. It sneaks in through the back door, sits quiet at the supper table, and asks not to be noticed, only to be felt. I reckon we all got a bit of Irene in us, hiding our true selves, hoping someone sees past the mask. And maybe, just maybe, there's a Beau out there for each of us too. Someone who sees past the mess and says, I choose you, no matter what. In the end, it wasn't just a wedding that changed Dustrock. It was a woman who dared to show her face and a man brave enough to love her for it.